This is Gwen with a reading of the introduction of Stolen Innocence. The Cradle. The birth certificate read, Gwendolyn Faye Collins, born to Lila Oldham and Charles Collins, at 9:10 p.m. Saturday, July the 5th, 1952, Madisonville, Kentucky. Gwendolyn was her teenager's mother's second child to be born out of wedlock. "It's a girl," announced Cecil Oldham to her daughter Lila and anyone else within hearing distance. "You have a baby girl." "I'll call and let everybody know," she said. As she made her way down the hall of the clinic to the phone booth, she nearly tripped over the empty wheelchairs that lined the wall. "I sure hope I can find him, because if I can't, that child is going to be hurt." Somehow she knew she would not reach him, but she tried anyway. "Hello? Is Charles there?" The voice on the other end confirmed what she already knew in her heart. "Well, if you see or hear from him, tell him he's a daddy now." He was nowhere to be found. There was no need to telephone anyone else, she knew. Her daughter Lila only wanted to see and hear from Charles. "I tried to tell that girl to stay away from him," she muttered to herself as she walked back to the small gray room where Lila was resting after 5 long hours of intense labor. Finally, that part was over. Lila was waiting for the nurse to return with the baby. She looked around at the gray walls in the tiny room, sparsely furnished with only 2 straight-back chairs and a metal nightstand in the corner. She pulled the blanket up around her neck and closed her eyes and slid down in the bed and ached for Charles. She had hoped Charles would be sitting by her bedside when she brought the baby into this world, clean, powdered, and wiggly. "I wonder where Charles could be," she thought. "Does he not care?" Hours later, when she opened her eyes again, she saw the doctor standing over her, dressed in his not-so-neat blue scrubs. The nurse followed behind him with a tiny bundle. "Is that her?" Lila asked. "Is that my baby? Please let me hold her." Looking down at the beautiful little girl she had just brought into this world, she desperately wanted everything to be all right. "If all goes well, Mrs. Oldham, you can go home in 3 days, the doctor said. "Thank you so much, doctor, but I'm ready to go now." Lila was excited about the tiny pink squirming baby, but she felt the pain of a widening wound because Charles had not been there to see his child born. She felt as if her whole world was crashing down around her. Cecil had not wanted her daughter Lila to bring yet another life into this world out of wedlock. Lila realized she had screwed up again. Her greatest fears were coming true. Charles must have run away. She had known that he might not show up after her mother angrily commanded him to marry her or else. Still, she couldn't help but hope. And her hope prodded her to ask again, "Nurse, has anyone called me?" "No, there's been no calls. No calls for you, Mrs. Oldham, since the last time you asked. Why don't you just lay back and get some rest?" the nurse said, both pity and kindness sounding in her voice. As the tears streamed down her cheeks, Lila turned her head to the wall and softly cried herself to sleep. Hours later, Lila woke to the sound of the nurse entering the room. "Breakfast, Mrs. Oldham?" "I'm not hungry," she said. Her mind was not on food. Instead, it was on Charles. As she began to reminisce on their good times together, she slowly began to accept that maybe she would never see him again. A bitter bile rose up in her throat. She gagged as she motioned frantically for the nurse to get the bedpan from the metal table. Lila lurched forward over the dirty-looking metal bowl. As it was slid before her, she vomited into it and wished that she could cough up the bitter emotions that was souring in her soul. When there was no more left in her stomach to spill out, she lay back against the pillow. Disconcerting thoughts raced through her mind. How could Charles leave her at a time like this? Even if they didn't get married right away, he should have been there for the birth of their baby. Surely he would not abandon the child. She stirred uneasily in the bed as she remembered living this moment once before, when her firstborn, Michael. The nurse shuffled in carrying a stack of crisp white sheets and interrupted Lila's anxious thoughts. Lila did not want the bed changed. She wanted to go home. She did not even want to move. "What a beautiful baby you have," the nurse chirped, a little too cheerfully. "Is this your first?" Lila's heard the question, but hurt choked back the answer. "No, this is my second. I have a little boy. He's 2, she mumbled sorrowfully. "Your husband must be so proud to have a boy and a girl," said the nurse. Lila could not answer for the lump in her throat because there was no husband, no father for either child, no one. Only the rustle of the sheets broke the heaviness, the sadness, and the silence of the room as the nurse changed the bed. Later, as Lila nestled in the fresh bedding, she suddenly felt darkness cloud around her as she visualized her innocence and her youthfulness passing before her. She wondered if she would ever get married to anyone. After Michael's father left her and Michael was born, Lila dropped out of school. She hadn't even finished her junior year. Then came Charles. She remembered that she and Charles had been childhood friends, and years later, as teens, they started to date and fell in love. But her dreams of marriage were soon not a part of his plans either. Now, as Lila looked back, she realized that every man in her life had deserted her. Even her own father had not stayed around. Now only 18, she was left alone to care for 2 small children. At least she knew that her mother would always be there. She also knew that this very moment she was probably the talk of the town. In Madisonville, everybody knew everybody, and the secrets of any kind were hard to be kept. Seems like things were different back then, huh? In the 50s, girls got pregnant early and was expected to take care of their children. Most of them assumed that responsibility. I wonder what happened. After Lila was released from the hospital, she took a cab to the little white house on Earl Street, where she lived with her mother and her son, Michael. All of the neighbors came to see the new baby. She tried not to listen as they whispered and gossiped about among themselves. "I wonder who will take care of this one," she heard one of them say to another. Their concerns were not caring, but snide and sarcastic. Despite the curious disapproval that swirled in and out of the house with visitors, Lila was proud of the little baby girl that lay in the basket next to her bed. Lila was my mother. Yes, I was the fatherless little girl, and this is my story. Stay tuned as the book is released, hopefully the end of this year or early January. Stolen Innocence. Thank you.